Business and the vast array of different delicate subjects regarding it are all very polarizing topics, spanning countless debates between many people with their own subjective viewpoint on the matter. From fraud to stock to investing to crypto, business has always been an internal part of our society and will continue to play an extreme part in our entire world for generations to come. One of the most important parts of business is business ethics. Business ethics and morals have become a widely controversial topic, with even massive companies such as Amazon and Facebook being met with criticism for some of their policies. So, after hearing about this, I wanted to dig deeper and look at some of the business practices. I wanted to see what they did, why they did it, and why and how so many of these companies are being called out only now. However, among all this, I also wanted to try to see the other side of the story, the people who are for these business practices, and form my own opinion on if these policies and regulations are good. To start off, I would like to highlight the definition on business ethics. The textbook definition of business ethics pertains to morality, responsibility, and transparency, among other things. When it comes to business, it is defined as good for the reason that transparency and morality is well received by both customers and investors. However, to me, the definition of ethics in business has changed. It's no longer about transparency or being known for integrity. Business is at its core, it's not founded on the strongest of moral principles. Now, ethics has become a thin line companies tread, a new turning point for customers when looking to purchase a product or service from a company. This is so important that companies have even started trying to market themselves as completely clear and translucent, although this is virtually never the case. This drastic change is not the most surprising, as ethics and morality are entirely subjective. With that being said, what are business ethics and morals exactly? Well, business ethics have multiple definitions, depending on how one interprets it. Business ethics is defined at the study of company policy, practice, and other potentially controversial company actions. In this definition, the law sets basic rules and regulations regarding companies, employee fraud, insider trading, bribery, discrimination, employee treatment, and other topics. And businesses will usually have these regulations as groundwork for their company principles, along with other widely accepted socially recommended policies to maintain a good corporate and social image and reputation. However, there's also the philosophical aspect of business ethics. Ethics means many things to many people. It could, to one person, only mean following through with one's actions and words and being truthful, but for many, businesses view ethics bad ethics to go against their own rules or do something society would view as morally wrong. Is these two definitions of ethics, along with a lot of marketing and advertising, which creates a good public image, something every company wants, creating a very delicate situation for the companies, as they have to continuously avoid current controversial subjects to stay relevant in the eyes of the public. What about business morals? That's a funny joke. Even if businesses did have some morals, it would still be, for the most part, in gray areas, as it is a business. Now that I've discussed the definition of business ethics, I will now talk about many rules and regulations regarding them. Since the start of business, many laws have been put in place to help prevent fraud and keep both workplaces and the environment clean and safe. There are essentially 6 core parts of businesses. Regulations have been passed against businesses to help regulate practices. These parts are advertising, employment and labor, environment, privacy, and health, including fraud as well. Although it's more of an add-on. There aren't too many explicit rules around fraud specifically, although it is illegal. Many smaller regulations combined essentially creates 3 large rules pertaining to advertising all businesses have to follow. The first rule states that the ads must be truthful and non-misleading. Businesses need to be able to back up claims made in the advertisements at any time, and advertisements must be fair to competitors and consumers. Additionally, in a similar vein to this, in compliance with the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act of 1966, all product labels must include information about the product, such as nutrition, size, and distribution, and manufacturing information. Then, with employment and labor, there are also 3 large regulations: the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, and the Immigration and Nationality Act. These laws mostly handle wages, overtime, immigration, and retirement to make them more just. There are also laws passed for the environment, which is mostly just laws that help education about the environment and how to keep it safe. Privacy laws and groups such as the Federal Trade Commission have also been put in place to help the government monitor companies to ensure privacy. Second to lastly, health and safety also contains multiple laws within which enforce safety and sanitation among companies, such as the Safety and Health Act of 1970, which enforces frequent inspections and grading to ensure a safe workplace. There are a couple general fraud rules, but nothing too notable. Now, you may or may not have noticed the painstakingly apparent leeway that these laws give. Many of these laws fail to address any unethical business practices that aren't extremely large, and even if they do, they don't do enough to help stop the problem. A great example of this is sexual harassment. This was one of the turning points in my decisions to choose this topic, this and the Activision drama. Essentially, Activision was a subject of hatred when all of the sexism and sexual harassment and verbal abuse they had shown towards their female game developers had come to light. While it was great that these huge companies such as Activision and other giant companies were held accountable, why did it take them so long to be forced to take responsibility for their actions? A big reason why is because sexual harassment is prominent. And that's because in these sexist environments, women are usually held at lower paying and lower class roles and don't have much influence or power over community decisions. This is another reason why it's extremely hard to win a lawsuit against a big company for this exact reason. As well as this, the sexist managers and higher-ups can keep the woman in a lower class position, further solidifying the apparent sexism. And fundamentally, on top of all this is another big reason why a giant titan-sized industries and companies have so much sexual harassment. The company and the industry just really doesn't want to waste time on improving the situation, as in the past, doing so was a norm and extremely easy to overlook and even accepted until recently. This has put companies in a darker shade of gray with this, as it is still extremely wrong. All of this is to say that ethics, morals, and our entire society was vastly different until now, with sexism, racism, animal cruelty, harmful environmental practices being widely regarded as completely acceptable and even commonplace. Companies have been able to get away with a lot more in the past, and that is why when these companies have been held accountable, they've been completely shaken to the core, partly due to the extreme rise of the internet and social media, and partly due to the fact that our generation is much less conservative and are much more open about identity and other topics that would seem unheard of to not talk about back in the day. Our society has completely changed. Gone are the days of racism and radical political views. Now everyone openly accepts these new concepts, and this is where companies come in. Many companies have tried to come over or have come in under ridicule for openly admitting racism and homophobia, but also being cruel to animals and horrible for the environment. The social pressure is almost completely transferred online, and many companies that have seen these companies get destroyed by the internet have either lost and have seen them lost a considerable amount of support from customers, and have seen that good publicity is depending on whether or not they are respecting the socially accepted rules that social media presents. This is all to say that nowadays an extreme amount of the pressure put on companies has come from social media, even more so than law. It has gotten to the point where companies have changed their entire marketing models and even entire business strategies to end up revolving around being well received by the public for doing good deeds or helping out with the environment. Nowadays, ads are very on the nose. About 20% of the time I will see one and it will be transparent about its uses, and the other 80% of the time will just full of lies and misconceptions. Many companies will use tactics including buffing up their product to make it look better. Axe, the body spray company Axe, is guilty of doing this a lot. Slightly altering or giving out slightly wrong information to make themselves look better. Use fake statistics to talk up their product, or just include offensive or inappropriate content to either cater to a specific genre of people, or just appall everyone enough that they would link a strong emotion to it. While virtually every company has done this, to the point where it becomes illegal is when an ad company specifically lies to the customer. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission fined the company Baserdorf for fooling customers into thinking that the cream they sold would help parts of your body shrink. While there have been some annoying and misleading ads have actually improved over time into some other aspects. For example, ads for beauty companies ended up objectifying the models used quite often. But with our recent switch to addressing these problems, we've even seen new women's movements in the form of hashtag women not objects and hashtag like a girl. As well as if companies have also started using LGBTQIA plus people and interracial people a lot more often in their ads as well. And while this is a very pleasant surprise from the linear and honestly race-exclusive ads, this change speaks to something much more interesting. The change in diversity seen in advertising is just a fraction of what companies are doing in an effort to gain substantial support from age all over the world. Due to the social constructs placed around them and the pressure of building a good public image, many companies have voiced support over the LGBTQ community, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Stop Asian Hate movement, and others like it as well. This is just scratching the surface of the complexity of business ethics. Companies have changed their entire marketing strategy to accommodate new trends so as to be the first one to usher support for those people and market themselves as completely in the know. However, companies haven't only diversified their view on race and sexuality, they've changed their stance on the environment and animals. There are many different ways companies have gone about this, some very transparent about wanting to help, and some just using environmental impact to justify questionable choices regarding customers. Philanthropy has also been a very popular subject among the whole of social media nowadays, and so companies are using that and sending strong messages to help, or without even showing them their product, essentially, just to get on the public's good side. There are some companies like Amazon that made a pledge to reach close to zero carbon emissions, along with several other pledges to help the environment, and have encouraged other companies to do the same. Many companies have just partnered with programs and organizations to try to reduce waste and generally do more for our planet. Some companies have just made some changes from which into reduce waste as well, but here's where morals comes into play. Some companies have used heavy topics such as climate change to justify cutting corners with their products while technically doing a good deed and gaining recognition with the public. A great example of this is with the most leading smartphone companies, such as Apple or Samsung. They recently stopped giving customers a charger in the box, supposedly to implement a new smaller box, with the reason that less chargers would be wasted and the box would be smaller, and that thus prevent more waste from ending up in landfills. However, this would actually cost for Apple quite a bit and would promote them in environmentally conscious, this is where I believe we have to call them out on it, a bit way. Because you would still have to buy, if you needed a charger, you would need to buy a new one from Amazon, and with the time taking to deliver it, open up the packaging and then opening up the box inside, that would be a lot more waste than simply having a couple inches of cardboard more. Similar things have happened with animal cruelty recently, just as much as with the environment, with companies being like McDonald's being put under the microscope by organizations like PETA for their cruel way of obtaining children and meat. This, combined with the quarantine, that caused many to transition into veganism, and so many companies have done their best to promote reduced animal cruelty or none at all, which could be a deal breaker if you were vegan. A lot of the advertising for vegans was misleading and placed an emphasis on how bad it was to eat meat. Usually because that was really what I heard my sister talking about all the time. So I assume that's because of her. So the social cues that the business decided to go about advertising that way. In the past, businesses maximized profit before employee. In fact, many factories and warehouses to this day are still byproducts over this belief. However, it is getting so bad that businesses such as Amazon have significantly lowered the working qualities. Many companies treat their employees well, but this shows how bad some of the lower paying jobs can get in Minnesota. Amazon especially withheld paychecks from a single mother and forced many of the workers to tirelessly work to the point where they thought they weren't even going to be able to use the bathroom. And during the pandemic, when jobs were already a scarcity, constantly encouraging employees to leave the company, even going so far as to offer a bonus and to stop giving raises to employees over 3 years seems pretty scummy. It's a complete it's a company's job to provide a safe and clean environment to work, but this work is still taking a severe toll on many of the companies reporting mental health, and the numbers are still these numbers are still going up about these people in these cases. It's very wrong from a moral standpoint and barely legal. The first time this news was released, there was plenty of outrage, but Amazon was so big and essential that it didn't do much. We need to try and understand why the company isn't doing something about this, and rightfully call them out and try to make a change happen. I would like to touch on fraud for a minute, as fraud is one of the most unethical business decisions ever. What is fraud, you ask? Fraud is the act of intentionally hiding and lying about something to the public to deceive them or make them believe that something that doesn't exist exists. So with that definition, fraud is automatically immoral and unethical, right? You are right to an extent. Some of the best ethical cases of fraud came from people like Conrad Black, who committed crimes like wire fraud, basically tampering with finances, among others as well. So why did I tell you this? Because I wanted to talk about Elizabeth Holmes, someone who did something even worse than this guy, but for vastly different reasons. This is what I consider to be the worst case of fraud and company and business ethics, as in all of company ethics. Elizabeth, age 19, dropped out of Stanford and launched Theranos, a company she claimed had come up with an apparently revolutionary way of testing blood from a simple finger prick. This idea sat very well with wealthy investors, and her company soon started to see exponential growth. Being backed by powerful people made her more credible, along with her entire demeanor. In 2015, Holmes was on top of the world, even being called the female Jeff Bezos. However, a whistleblower called out Holmes on her trademarked testing device, the Edison, and the Wall Street Journal even went so far as to claim that the results were unreliable and the firm had been using commercially available machines to test the device, and their actual device was faulty at best. Lawsuits eventually piled up, partners cut ties, and in 2016, U.S. regulators banned Holmes from operating a blood testing service for 2 years. Lawsuits eventually got too much, and then Theranos was eventually dissolved. After settling the civil lawsuits in which the investors claimed she fraudulently claimed over $700 million from them, she was arrested 3 months later. She got out, but now she is back in and could potentially actually go to jail for 20 years. That's insane. Getting to the end, I will talk about how business ethics as an academic field has evolved over time. The 1960s was a turning point in our society, and businesses were starting to get backlash very regularly for some of their more controversial actions and created social responsibility. This term varies, but it means doing a good deed in society to kind of balance out the bad. In response to that, business schools developed courses in social responsibility or social issues in management. The things were focused on the point of view of a manager and of law itself. Business ethics is an academic field, date back to 1970, although the first meeting in an anthology of business ethics was made in Kentucky in 1974. 1979 and onwards, more famous textbooks were created, and this field developed very similarly to the field of medical ethics, which had emerged 10 years early in the 1960s. The field was quite controversial. Many thought the business wasn't a philosophical endeavor, and the other group thought that philosophy didn't bring anything interesting to business. In 1980, the core structure of being business was set, and people were finally starting to see the appeal of it. And environment was actually talked about more in this as well. Lines between philosophy and business often became blurred now. The course was developed a lot and soon became institutionalized with over 500 courses similar to this one. The Society for Business Ethics was founded in 1980, and others followed suit. The Bentley College Center for Business Ethics was the first college ever to be was almost specifically for business ethics and was founded in 1976. Continues as one of the leading business ethics centers. Over a dozen more appeared within the next 10 years, and many have established since then around the United States and in countries around the world. By the 1980s and to 1990s, business ethics had become international, with groups such as the World Trade Organization being talked about, showing that it has progressed to a global state. Although the academic form of business ethics through its evolution, it's sought to be develop contracts with the business community, the history of the actual world, and the history of business ethics, and it has developed into a sort of movement as well. There's one more question that I want to touch on before this inquiry ends, and that is how business ethics are slowing down business ethics are kind of slowing down companies. In my opinion, that's completely false. Business ethics are really just a set of rules and regulations. They don't really hinder anything. They're mostly just a set of guidelines to help companies, and they're usually beneficial. That's it for this inquiry.